So ladies, gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, welcome back to a brand new Superman and Lois recap, review, and breakdown. And today, we're talking about episode 6, of which I feel like at certain points was pretty crazy, and I'm sure you know the scene I'm on about there between Luthor and Clark. But I would say that this episode's story more just kind of, was stirring the pot a little bit. It's not like we added crazy amounts of new recipes in there, or ingredients rather. Sure, there were certain other subplots teased to move along this season, and that's actually going to tie into the promo for next episode that we're going to cover at the end. But I would say for this episode, it was just really raising tensions more and more for the Kent family and Luthor himself. Slowly cooking along the storyline with Luthor's plans, but also just the absolute, utter frustration for the Kents, but also Clark. Like, things are getting to a boiling point now. So right at the beginning, speaking of which, we pick up with Luthor raging in his new building in Smallville after losing the chance to be with his daughter Elizabeth last episode, of which we do have to point out once again was a choice of his own making. Even in this moment, I think, starting the beginning phases of shedding that version of himself by burning her photo. And what I mean by that more so is that we can't forget that version of himself, even though Lex is still diabolical, has been diabolical, and will carry on to be diabolical, there was this version of himself that had the purpose of finding his daughter again. The 17 years that was robbed from him, right before he went to jail, he's going through the divorce, fighting to keep his daughter, all of this stuff, and now he's kind of lost that purpose and replaced it with revenge. And not only that, of course, he's lost Doomsday, and he's gonna have to think on his feet on how he's gonna get what he wants. And that's another thing this episode. I was thinking, where is Doomsday? I'm sure, for all we know, since Lois got through to him, he's just chilling somewhere in the Caribbean on the beach, just having a cocktail or something. I would love to know any predictions you guys have there, because that seems a bit too predictable for him to come in last moment, maybe sacrifice himself because he doesn't want to live as a monster anymore, but also take Lex out with him. It seems like one of the ways things are going to go, but who knows? Who really knows? Because other than that, how is Doomsday going to live? He won't want to live like that, and how would he be bested when he can't die? Unless he does it to himself, maybe, but again, also takes Luthor out with him. But either way, in this moment, Amanda arrives and he says, send this to Milton. And we see that he's got a little design for 8 of these devices that emit red solar light. Now, in this moment, I thought these would be like little grenades or something that he was planning to use on Clark in a bit of a one-to-one, not necessarily for this episode, but obviously later on, we find out that he's replaced all of the street lamps for that awesome scene later on. And once again, guys, another reference to Milton, as in Brainiac Milton. The amount of times this character's been brought up, you have to think we're going to see him. I keep saying the same thing in every review that we're doing. Maybe we will. Now, obviously, in the meantime, back at the Kent farm, Lois and Clark, all they can do, because, it's not like they can literally take Luthor out in the way that he wants to just kill them. They need to go about it the right way, and they want to take Luthor back to prison through maybe flipping one of his people. But I wonder if this is the way they're making it seem like he's going to be taken down. But then I bring back my theory of the whole Doomsday thing, right? Again, it is just utter speculation, but I'm just wondering, will Lex Luthor die this season, or will he end up going back to prison as a bit of his own personal hell and knowing that he never succeeded? Or are they going to do the thing where they make it seem like they may legally be able to take him down again, but then Lex bests them, saying, you're never going to be able to touch me, and just when all hope seems to be, off the table, and they can't flip anyone, they can't send them back to prison, that's when Doomsday comes in and just does the thing that I said earlier. But then I guess that could seem a bit anticlimactic, because all of the work done so far is just, put to the side because, the Beast shows up and just flies him off into space. So again, I think I keep thinking out loud like this because I'm really wondering where this season's going to go with regards to taking down Lex Luthor for once and for all. But on the other side of things, we have Jordan show Lois and Clark multiple reels or TikToks or whatever you want to call it instead of Jonathan, or people recording Jonathan across the world, saving people as Superboy. He's been incredibly busy, to the point of this episode, Lois and Clark are thinking that maybe he's being a bit too busy. And it's not like in a bad way, but it's just like the harder you throw yourself into that, that's when you kind of start making mistakes. There has to be kind of a balance, because if you overexert yourself, yes, that's when this episode they showed that example of how Jonathan feels like he should have heard Lana screaming, which is like really true, because if he can hear like someone scream in a truck going over the bridge across the world as of when that's happening, and he just flies over there, you would have thought he would hear Lana. So that was a good example for them to show him, like, hey, when you're exhausting yourself like this, this is when things like this can happen, even if it's still not your fault, you know? And also, this episode, we have Clark getting gray hairs, and obviously this just comes under the whole thing with Sam Lane's heart. This is the other kind of plot this season that they're cooking along slowly. It's very obvious where they're going with it, with the teasers we've had already, the teasers we're continuing to get, and how it's still not truly been, you know, resolved where things are going to end up with him, even in this episode. But they're trinkling little clues in there. It's like, hey, he's still not recovered with his powers. He's still partially deaf in one ear. Now he's getting gray. It's taking him longer to heal this episode. But again, I think this is just going down the route of where I'm okay with it going, in terms of this season ending in such a way where, don't get me wrong, Clark has the perk of still being a Kryptonian, and he's going to be a lot stronger than other humans out there. But the future of saving the world will be left in the hands of the Super Sons, Jordan and Jonathan Kent, while Superman takes a bit of a backseat. Now, as for Lex this episode, the large step in his plan, other than trolling the Kent family, is to move Luthor Corp to Smallville, which is pretty crazy. Like, you see some of the board members there, that same guy we saw before, what's his name, Bash or something like that, not happy about that. I mean, I do kind of get it, like, hey, there's Metropolis, and then there's like this random farmland in Smallville that you want to build a whole Luthor Corp tower. I don't know. So yes, that is pretty nuts, and obviously something that has been set up for quite a while now this season is that he has to go through Lana, who's putting a lot of red tape in his way. Basically threatens her, and she's more or less in his crosshairs. And one thing I really liked about all of the scenes with Michael Cudlitz this episode is that we can't forget, now that he's literally burnt a photo of his daughter, meaning like burning that purpose, he is now kind of like the gutter level version of himself. I know he's kind of already like that as Luthor, but you know, he is willing to do the most nasty things. Like his true core self has been exposed now. I mean, if there was any redeeming factor to Luthor before, it was because of his daughter, right? Now he's in full conviction mode, and he's willing to do terrible things even to Lana's family. Now, carrying along the Lana story here, in where she bumps into Clark, and the scene was pretty funny with how he was trying to shove the hair dye into his pocket. They both go to the seller of the land to try and convince him to not sell to Luthor, right? But the reason for that is because she knows, or at least suspects, that Clark is Superman, and thinks that because of everything he's done for his town and the world, really, if he thinks selling to Luthor is a very bad idea, then she won't do that. Now, this in conjunction with just, you know, the scene with the boys when they have the coach go to them, wanting to put them back on the team to utilize their special powers. I mean, it seems very, very obvious at this point that word is getting around the town, like it's spreading like wildfire. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later with regards to the whole, hey, Superman's name being out there, and will they actually be able to turn that around? Now, in this moment with Lois, Clark, and Jonathan tells them that Luthor is arguing with Lana and the seller, and he is getting very, very pissed off that she changed her mind on the sale, and even offers her $10 million and everyone else in this bar, because, you know, at the same time we had some people of Smallville saying, oh, well, you know, this doesn't feel right, so maybe you shouldn't do it, and Lex just tries to use one of the only power things that he can do if he can't intimidate or commit a crime in front of everyone right now, because that'd be very stupid to do. Hey, let's just chuck my wealth at them. And then later that night, we get that moment with Lana. She wakes up, there's gas flooding the house, and then she has Otis attack her because Luthor sent him to kill her. Now, it's very lucky Sarah came in with that baseball bat because obviously, again, as we mentioned earlier, the boys weren't exactly listening in, and also Jordan wasn't because he's just completely signed out of this whole situation, but more on that in a little bit. Now, after the Kents arrive, you just see how furious this made Clark. Just hearing how one of his oldest friends almost died, hearing Lana talk about the pain of the strangulation. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Tyler Hoechlin's Clark this angry. I mean, we've had that badass scene before when he walks into the diner and confronts Candace's father, but here, this is just like after, I mean, you can't blame him. After Sam Lane, after being killed himself technically, and now Lana almost got murdered, as well as her teenage daughter Sarah. We just cut to a scene of him screaming in the streets of Smallville for Luthor, and I love the mood of this night that they decided to go with as well, because there was a storm brewing. Clark even grabs him, threatens him, saying they're gonna end him, flip Otis. I am intrigued about that because Otis is in custody now, so what would make Otis flip? How are they going to manage to do that? But this is when Luthor flips the switch and all of the street lamps turn red with that red solar light, deactivating Clark's powers. And I loved this, by the way. This was just awesome. Like giving both Clark Kent and Lex Luthor a chance to fight each other fair and square and get like all of these pent up feelings out in the open through, well, just the form of beating the living crap out of each other. Now, Clark initially seemed to be just doing so well. Like, he broke Lex's nose and he, like, clicks it back into place. But once he gets, like, a boot to the face and you hear the ringing, like, his hearing, from his bad ears start to kick in, this is when I was getting a bit worried. And, he repeatedly gets the crap kicked out of him as Lois and the boys turn up. And at this point, I have to admit, I was getting a bit annoyed seeing Clark being beaten like this because he's already suffered so tremendously at the hands of this man. So seeing him get kicked in again and again and again, I was like, no, please get the upper hand again. And he does, thank God. He even manages to like fracture Luthor's wrist in this moment, and ultimately he bests him. And Luthor even says in this moment, which I thought was, not exactly a W moment from him, like he starts laughing as Clark's family is watching, saying that he always knew Superman was a facade. Now they see you for who you really are. And I was like, not really, bro. Like, that beating was just, and you didn't expose anything about Superman and Clark. I guess like what he was going for there is like, Superman wouldn't show such violence, right? He wouldn't act this way, but within the context of the story. And Clark knowing that none of his blows would have ended up killing Luthor because of, his powers being deactivated by the red solar lights. Yeah, Luthor, you have absolutely no point whatsoever. I have to give major props to Tyler Hoechlin in this moment. Again, I've never seen him act this angry before in a scene, and just with all of the context the show has built up across this whole storyline between Lex Luthor and Superman, and just Lois and everything, it was just such a deserved scene. It wasn't like one of those scenes where they just start fighting and it's like, there's not really much here, so other than the action, I guess that's kind of cool. No, there was a lot to get out of this scene as fans, as an audience, because of what they've built up so far. So damn, that was, I can imagine this is a scene that's going to be clipped around in a few places. Now, back at the Kent farm, Clark is all bruised up, as we went over earlier, and in this moment, and they've been teasing it for a while already, Jordan realizes that he's wrong, and he can't just shut everything out. Doing nothing makes things worse, so he's evidently coming back, and the Super Sons are going to be, the protectors of tomorrow. And yes, by the way, I am aware about the kind of, let's just say, suit leaks. I didn't really want to get into it so much last episode just because of spoiler reasons, but just in case you aren't aware, not that I'm going to show them here, just in case you want to be surprised, there are certain leaks going around with regards to a certain outfit or two that Jonathan and Jordan may be getting. So just be careful about that, because it's pretty awesome stuff, And it was kind of officially leaked in a way because of a book that's going on sale on Amazon. I don't know if I don't think they would have removed it, but yeah, it's kind of like a legitimate leak, but it's a shame that it got out there. But yeah, obviously, I've just been waiting for Jordan to get to this point. But what I'm now looking forward to, by the way, in the next few episodes is now that Jordan's coming back into the fold and Jonathan wants his help out there to save people, I really hope they just give us a scene or two, something really small will be fine, of just Jonathan and Jordan flying out there, saving a collapsing bridge together, and them getting on really, really well as brothers as they land back down at the Kent farm and pat each other on the back. That kind of thing, I think, is going to be great to see. Now, Luthor, at the end of the episode, he's gone back to Metropolis, and he's kind of going into the next major step of his plan. As I said earlier, Amanda has fully committed to him and whatever the hell he decides to do, and is even going to help him strategize how to take down Superman and Lois, saying the first thing we need to do is to get you a killer suit, of which, as we've seen in the trailers, this isn't really spoilers, we see Lex suiting up in the steel suit, which, considering how absent John Henry is from this season, I assume that he's going to get a hold of pretty easily. Now, I fully expected him to start shaving in this moment, since we're now stepping into that, part of the season where the trailers also teased a very clean cut Lex Luthor in a trench coat, very comic book accurate looking. And considering we've had a bearded Lex, it feels good to know we're going to get like a, very, comic book accurate version of a Michael Cudlett's Lex Luthor. And also kind of getting him his own war suit, if you will, even if it is a repurposed steel suit. But again, now I'm thinking like crazy ideas. My ideas are going everywhere. Like, okay, so we're going to have, Superman versus Lex Luthor. This, I think, is a believable fight now that Clark is weakened with Sam Lane's heart. Like, that's really cool to me. I mean, I remember when Superman had a hard time against John Henry Irons initially, even when he was fully powered. So now that Lex is going to have that suit, that is pretty cool to me, knowing that it's kind of really the equivalent of when Clark and Lex were under the red solar lights earlier. But now with Superman depowered, but Lex in a powered suit, it still kind of puts him maybe not at the same level, but a similar level. But then, the wild card is still Doomsday. Like, is he just going to fly in and be like, boys, stop? I don't know. Now, the promo tease for next episode is centered completely around controlling the secret that seems to be fairly exposed right now in Smallville, with Clark seemingly setting someone up in the Superman suit to do a save that's displayed on the news while he's at that store that he bought the hair dye from earlier. Now, he does say that he just went to the parking lot, so it could still be Clark doing it really fast, but then again, what if he got one of the boys to do it? I'm not sure. The thing about this, because honestly, the whole promo is really just centered around this, it's going to be interesting to see if they actually do revert suspicions or, as I said earlier, decide to embrace this for the future. But then again, going down that route, it would get out of control, and the boys and their identity would forevermore be public as both Superboys. So I'd love to know your theories here, because I just don't know how they're going to believe it if they do try and revert the whole suspicion thing, because I know there's a suspension of disbelief thing with a show like this. But after the people of Smallville know what Superman looks like, right? They know what he looks like. They've seen him up close in person so many times now. And now they know it's Clark. How do they go back from unseeing, hey, his face looks like his, oh, it makes so much sense, to then be convinced, oh yeah, maybe it isn't him. Not to mention how they saw the boys and Lois react to Superman's death, and, that made them connect the dots in the first place. But having said all of this, I do also dig and kind of find it cool if they did have the town keep the whole secret and it never ever extends beyond there, like as a loyalty from Smallville to Superman. I wouldn't be surprised if it does end that way, with a scene of multiple people swearing to not say anything, but realistically it's sketchy as hell because it's probably near to impossible for so many people in a town to keep that secret. But for the TV show, it's maybe something they're going to do. So again, let me know your thoughts. Do you think they're going to tease that, maybe Clark is really going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle here, but then just as we're thinking it's going to happen, it doesn't happen, and he has to accept that this is the way things are now. But I also just find it weird if they do manage to take back the secret and make it look like Clark isn't Superman. Because once you've written yourself into that corner, I think it's going to be really hard to convincingly write yourself out of it. So I think I'm just worried that it's not really going to be... It might be a bit convenient with whatever way it goes down, just from like a critical standpoint when I review the episode. But we're gonna have to wait and see. But overall, guys, obviously enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to like things really ramping up again like it did in the first 3 episodes. Not to say that there isn't or hasn't been many things to enjoy about the past few. This one as well, I found more enjoyable than last episode. I'm pretty sure, looking back on it. So yeah, I just feel like as we're ramping more and more up towards the end of the season, next week's episode 7, we've only got 10 this season. I think I'm just looking forward to Lex Luthor really going into full, again, gutter level version of himself with absolutely full conviction to destroy Superman and Lois. But let me know what you thought of this episode down in the comments below. Any theories that you have based on what I said, any predictions, or just in the general scope of the future and the way this season could end off. Like, what do you think is going to happen with Doomsday? And also, if you got this far in the video, I'd greatly appreciate your support through just leaving a like on the video. It does go a long way. Of course, consider subscribing for many other videos on the channel I'm sure you'd enjoy. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to love you and leave you. So again, thank you so much for your support. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.